Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor here. I got to tell you folks, I had to make sure I got a good night's sleep last night, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is our guest today, her freaking curriculum vitae or vitae or however you pronounce it, her resume for lack of better terms, I had to rehearse because let me just tell you a little bit about our guest today. Our guest today can be found on the pages and on the covers of, ready, here we go, Better Homes and Gardens, Delta Sky, Family Circle, Glamour, Health, Martha Stewart, Men's Fitness, the Oprah Magazine, Parade, Prevention, Real Simple, Red Book, Self, Women's Health, and she's a contributing editor of Woman's Day, contributing writer for Oxygen, and is a contributing editor of Dog Fancy. There you go. And she co-authored a book with 2 Harvard physicians, Understanding Your Food Allergies, Intolerances. And she's here, and her name's Karen Asp, and I'm excited to invite her. Karen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me. It sounds like you did your homework and you got a lot of sleep last night, so good for you.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was because, as evidenced by your work in the field, you have seen and experienced a diversity of mainstream health, fitness, and nutrition media. Would that be fair?
Yes, that is fair to say.
And I'm very curious just to open up the podcast with, during your journey in the mainstream A List health, fitness, and nutrition publication world, have you seen any transitions or trends, or like what was the past, what is the present, and what do you perceive as the future of health, fitness, and nutrition?
Well, I think, Jonathan, one of the things that, we used to talk about ages ago, I don't want to say ages ago, but maybe a decade ago was, everything was really focused on getting your workout in, making sure that we log enough time at the gym, on your treadmill, in your basement, wherever you're logging that time. And I think that we've kind of seen a shift away from that, largely because we know that, we are not a population that moves as much as we should just during the day. And I think that one of the things that has evolved over the years, thanks to all of the research and the science that's been going on, is that, those gym sessions are fantastic and don't you dare give up on them. But even more importantly, it's really those day-to-day activities. So what are you doing when you're not at the gym? When you're sitting at your office all day, or when you're, sitting in a car, driving your kids around for hours at a time, where can you factor more activity in? And I think that that's really kind of, for me, an interesting shift in the fitness side of things, just because, again, like I said, I think that we're finding that your daily physical activity, your daily physical functioning really kind of may matter more than that gym workout that you're getting. The other thing I think that's shifted too a little bit is, we are a nation of, and I'm actually, Jonathan, I'll give you a little aside, but we are, a nation of sitters. We sit for everything. When you go to the movie theater, when you go to the doctor's office to wait, when you wait at a restaurant, when you sit at your office desk, you are sitting. We are all sitting. And so I think that there's also been an interesting shift to try to get us away from, again, that sedentary activity, molding in that, more activity throughout the day. So that's been a big shift, I think.
Well, from a fitness perspective, I really like that. And people might be a little shocked to hear that, because sometimes my message can be, let's be fair. My tagline in some ways is eat more and exercise less, but do it smarter. When people hear the exercise less but smarter, they're like, well, clearly Jonathan just means sitting on the couch and never moving, which is actually not what I mean. What I mean is actually much more analogous to what you just described, which is what we have seen as potentially one of the most conclusive and non-controversial developments in the fitness arena over the past 2 decades, is how short bursts of safe, intense physical movement is incredibly beneficial and also and non-controversially beneficial. And then also that simple movement is beneficial, and that neither one of those things have much risk of side effects. But it's this historical movement that we had about just going to the gym and putting in hours upon hours of aerobic or cardiovascular exercise it seems like that might be making way for either end of the spectrum, for lack of better terms. Is that somewhat characterizing what you're seeing, or am I taking my own liberties?
No, you said it perfectly. I think that that's exactly what I've been seeing too. And it's not to say, if there are listeners out there who are saying, but you know what, Karen and Jonathan, I still love my, 30-minute runs, or my, I love cross-country skiing in the winter, let's say for, hour and a half at time. That's fantastic. Don't give that up. But I think for those people who are really struggling to find their way into the fitness world, which is the majority of individuals, the news really is good in that it doesn't have to be a long, arduous workout. And I would probably even argue, too, that if there are people out there who could just get a little more active, i.e. walking to the mailbox, or doing a little 10-minute walk at lunch, doing taking your dog out after work for a 20-minute walk, and those all will add up in the very end. So yes, to your point, I think that you said it perfectly.
And I think that's a fascinating distinction, Karen, of there is movement and being active, which oftentimes is conflated with exercise. And I personally see exercise as a bit more, for lack of better terms, let's call it unnatural, meaning that when you exercise, you're doing a very deliberate, almost program-based, science-y thing for a definite period of time, which is, that's not to criticize it in any way, shape, or form, but things like gardening, playing with your kids, walking to your mailbox, that is just movement or activity.
Correct, Jonathan. And I like to refer to it as kind of, in my own vocabulary, I kind of say that there's structured exercise, which is the exercise that, as you mentioned, would be, doing your strength training, taking that spin class. It is doing a prescribed amount for, that intent, for whatever intensity you've chosen. And then there's the non-structured exercise or activity, which is really just your daily movement. So.
And then I think there's a fascinating third bucket to it, which characterizes what you mentioned about cross-country skiing, or I always use the analogy of my brother who enjoys boxing. Like, is boxing a good form of exercise? Well, you get punched in the head a lot. So in terms of side effects, but so, and the point I'm making here is then there's a bucket called athletics or hobbies. Like, from experience, playing football is not a good form of exercise because I've never blown my knee out or torn my pec doing exercise, but I have done both of those things while playing football. I love football, don't get me wrong, but it's dangerous. And we certainly, if we're doing things to improve our health, one thing we want to keep in mind is the risk of injury, because when you're injured, that's not good for your health.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, risk of injury. I mean, you definitely, you always have to listen to your body because, again, if you can't exercise or move throughout the day, you've now taken away one of the ways in which you can, be healthier. And if you're looking to control that weight or even lose weight.
And really the fascinating and encouraging point here, Karen, and you made this earlier, is this is quite brilliant because whereas historically the message was very off-putting in the sense that I would say if there's one thing universally in this country and around the world that we lack, it's time. So if our prescription for health is I need you to spend 2 hours a day doing something that's incredibly boring, likely painful, and that will not generate results in the short term, that you might as well just no. Like that's if people aren't going to do that. But if we just say, just move around, take the stairs instead of the elevator, and then for literally on the order of minutes, we're talking 1 to 5 minutes a day. If you do it correctly, or even a week, if you do it really correctly, you can perform a almost therapeutic form of physical movement, which is so intense and so safe that you can't do a lot of it, but also so intense and so safe that it's almost analogous to an immunization. It's like a very controlled stress on your body that then has these widespread physiological impacts. And it's quick, so it doesn't take a lot of time.
Right. No, Jonathan, although I'll banter with you on one point that you made, which is the lack of time. And I think that's, while we are a culture that has a perceived lack of time, I don't know that it's necessarily a realistic lack of time in that regard. In other words, I think that everybody could find 20 to 30 minutes a day to take that walk, go for a run, whatever they want. Versus, let's say, watching TV. We know that the numbers of TV watching are just skyrocketing. And so I think that, in other words, what I'm saying is you make time for what's important to you. And if your health is important to you, then you will make time to do things that are important for your health. So, but the good news is, as you said, it doesn't have to take, again, it doesn't have to take a ton of time. And it doesn't have to take hours at a time. If, again, for those people who like doing longer workouts, who like doing that sort of thing, it's fine. Don't stop it. But for those people who haven't, it's okay not to join that bandwagon.
Certainly. And it's also encouraging that when we talk about making time, which we certainly should, for movement and for these unstructured activities, as you call them, the other good news with that, and this is just people often don't think about this, but it certainly matters, right? Is you don't need to go someplace necessarily to do that, right? Like we can say 30 minutes, but if it's 30 minutes and then it's 20 minutes to drive to the gym and 20 minutes to drive home and you get stuck in traffic, like by the end of the day, and you got to change clothes because you don't want to look bad at the gym, so you got to put on your cute little Lululemon outfit. And
Okay, wait, Jonathan, I love Lululemon, so.
No, I love. My wife loves Lululemon too. I mean, my point though is that going to the gym can easily make what is only 20 minutes of exercise into a 2-hour ordeal.
Totally, Jonathan. In fact, I actually, to be very honest, as athletic as I am, and as much as I move throughout the day, I don't belong to a gym largely because it chews up time. It's easier for me to make that movement at my house. No, that's not for everybody, but it is easier for me to do that. And it's time. You're right. You spend all that time driving and changing, and it's a mess.
So certainly it sounds like encouraging developments of it doesn't, we can do it in a smarter fashion. It can take less time. We can incur less injury, and that's all goodness. So what have you seen in the nutrition arena?
Jonathan, in the nutrition arena, I think we're seeing, again, that return. And I know that this is going to go along with your message, but, and I'm a very strong believer in this as well, but that return to eating real, whole foods. And I think that there's, more of an emphasis on really choosing foods, loading your diet with plant-based foods more than anything. I'm not suggesting, that you have to go vegetarian, but yet I am suggesting that most of your meals should be, those plant-based foods, whole, real foods. And I think that it's a message that's been out there, but I think that with all of the recent studies showing the benefits of, a more plant-based diet, the harm in eating some of these other foods, I think that that's going to become an even stronger message throughout the next year down the road even.
Well, Karen, I'm so happy you brought that up because I personally get in some ways, I get a little frustrated by what I think is a false dichotomy that's currently put out there. And that's that, for example, a plant-based diet is analogous. Well, one is analogous just in and of itself. Let's just say that a plant-based diet is analogous with health, which is not true. And a plant-based diet is analogous with being a vegetarian, which is also not true. In fact, most people don't realize this, but a sane lifestyle, or the form of eating that my research recommends, is 100% plant-based. If you define plant-based as the bulk, the volume of food that goes into your mouth should be 70 to 80% derived from plants.
Right.
And derived from high quality plants. And that doesn't actually even necessarily mean that the majority of your calories necessarily would be coming from vegetables, because it's nearly impossible to get all those calories from vegetables. and certainly a plant-based diet, which is sugar, which is based in plants, and wheat, which is also a plant, is very different from a plant-based diet, which consists of 3/4 of your plate consisting of healthy plant-based fats, vegetables, low fructose fruits. That's 3/4 of your plate. That's a plant-based plate, but that doesn't mean it can't have a big old piece of grass-fed beef or wild-caught salmon on it as well.
Right. Absolutely, Jonathan. And I would agree 100% with you. But again, it's very interesting. One of the things that I like to do, people often complain, and I'm a huge time management girl, but when I'm standing at the grocery store, waiting to check out, I actually don't mind waiting in that grocery store line. And I say it because it's kind of an experiment for me to kind of watch and see what everybody is pulling out of their carts and putting on that conveyor belt. So I look to the people in front of me, to behind me, and it is very interesting, Jonathan, to see, most of the people are not choosing the foods that you've just mentioned. I mean, most of the foods are in boxes. And not to say that their box foods are bad, I'm not saying that, but most of the foods are very processed, they're very packaged. And then you look at the shape and the size of the individual who is purchasing these products, and you can understand perhaps why they might be a little bit more round than they should be. So, I mean, it does. Yes. I mean, we should be loading our plates a little bit differently. And I think that's, something I think that we've forgotten throughout the years. And also too, I mean, our environment doesn't make it easy necessarily. You have to kind of work a little bit harder, but it is possible. But our environment doesn't always make it easy to load the plate like that.
Absolutely. And I crave, and I don't think this will ever happen because, and certainly I'm curious about your commentary here. I think it's a bit of human nature to focus on differences and to try to turn things into more of ideological, like right versus, rational. And the reason I say this is, well, by the time this podcast airs, this won't be recent, but the Dr. Oz show recently had Dr. Lauren Cordain and a wonderful blogger and author, Nell Stevenson, Paleoista, on talking about the paleo diet. And oftentimes you see to me, in the internet community, you've got like paleo versus vegetarians.
Right.
And ironically, that is a complete false dichotomy, because like if you watch what Nell and Lauren were saying, actually 2/3 to 3/4 of your plate is absolutely plants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the most nutrient dense plants you could find. So it seems like everyone basically agrees that, like, let's eat the most nutrient dense plants we can eat, and we eat the most nutrient dense animals we can eat. And let's ensure that both of those have as little poison in them or applied to them, because they both can, right? GMO corn is a plant, but I'm not sure it's the best thing for any of us. Right. So how do we mold this into a more common denominator, eat more nutrient dense, less poisonous food, and less of a plants are good, animals are bad, or ideological debate? What do you think?
Jonathan, I mean, all of your points are 100%. I would say yes to all of that. I mean, I think that the message is, really, if you want to make it simple, it's quality over quantity. And I think that we just, as people, as consumers, we have to be very conscious of what we do put in our mouth. I mean, that's not to say that I'm not going to eat the occasional, Snickers bar or, M&Ms or whatever it might be. But 90% of the time, I'm, going to be choosing foods that are, high quality, nutrient dense foods. And I think too, Jonathan, that one of the things that I'm perceiving is that I think that people are so confused. There are so many messages. And as you said, there are so many quote unquote diets going against each other. So you've got the paleo, as you mentioned, you've got a vegetarian, which, more of a lifestyle kind of way of eating, not necessarily a diet. You've got the Mediterranean diet, but all of these diets, I think that people are very, very confused about what to eat. And so it all just gets kind of lost. And again, I wish that, we could make the message simpler, which is just that it's really quantity over quality again. But again, you've got to know, it's quality over quantity, but you've got to know what quality means. And I think that, again, if you are somebody who is concerned about your health, and I wish that all of us would be, I wish that we would all take responsibility for our health, then you're going to educate yourself about, okay, what is what's a quality food versus a non-quality, what should I be eating? So I don't know if that's your question. But
oh, no, I think, and I love this paralysis by analysis that I think a lot of us face, which is because there is so much debate about what I would characterize as what's right or perfect versus what would just stem the obesity and diabetes epidemics. Like, let's for a second forget about this Tower of Babel approach, which is like that you could somehow perfect your health and live forever. I mean, we're all going to die. So I mean, there's an element of, will eating, I don't know, X, is it good for you or bad for you? Well, if it's bad for you, but if it's bad for you to the extent that it will cause cancer if you could consume it for 300 years, it's irrelevant, because you're not going to live for 300 years. Like, you'll die from something else before that kills you. So the reason I say that is, if we just rewind and we say, instead of having a paralysis by analysis, start with the simple rule of, the further away it is from something you could find directly in nature, the less, generally speaking, the less healthy it is for you. And this, to me, I think is actually quite helpful for even things like sugar and some grains. Like, if you could eat sugar cane, like if you want to actually eat sugar cane, eat it, because you will not eat very much of it. And if you actually want to eat wheat off the stalk, go ahead, because you will not overeat that, and you'll probably be like, well, this is disgusting, so I'm not going to eat it. But
absolutely, yeah. But so your message, Jonathan, is, I mean, the simpler you can make it. And I think it's that way with fitness too. There doesn't need to be a quote unquote prescription necessarily. Just move more throughout the day. Is again, kind of bringing it back to basics.
Move more throughout the day, and also I would say is maybe. Don't torture yourself, because I feel like some of this, not only from a dietary perspective, but also from an exercise perspective, is when you think about, you characterize it perfectly, and this is also reflected in my work, is the quality over quantity paradigm shift. The old movement of eat 1,200 calories a day is torture. Like, it's literally torture. If you're a POW, they restrict your calories. So
absolutely,
and do moderate intensity exercise for extended period of times, like hours, which again, if you're a POW, they will make you do hard labor for extended periods of times. It's literally torture. It seems like we're moving away from that and a bit more making healthy again, which is a tautology, but it seems like we've gotten away from that.
I think so. Again, I think that if you living a healthier life, I think can be, it is an overwhelming thing, but there are some very, very simple things you could do, as we've already talked about. Just like I said, if you're sitting a lot, maybe every hour, 5 minutes, make sure that you're getting up. I actually use a standing desk now, so I don't sit. And I've actually, in my day, have reduced my sitting time to about under 2 hours a day. That includes meals and things like that. So, I mean, just, little things. I mean, I'm also a big fan of if you wanted to go this route and you're a data person, I love like body monitoring devices that kind of show you where you're being sedentary in your day and where you're being a little bit more active. So again, kind of an advanced version of a pedometer. But all of those things are just designed to kind of motivate you to move a little bit more, to do things like that. So.
Well, I love it. And I love that message of simplicity and sanity, lowercase s, because really this can't be that complex, right? I mean, that's in some ways it's a paradox. Though it seems like the more we've begun to worry about this, the less healthy we've become. And how did our grandmothers not get diabetes? Like, I mean, because they didn't, right? Or our great grandmothers, they didn't have these rates. In fact, the obesity rates, the earliest records we have in the early 20th century was about 3% of the population was obese.
Yeah.
And no one counted any calories and no one went to any gyms. So it can't be that complex. So I'm so encouraged to hear that you're also seeing that reflected in the mainstream as well, because I think that's really what we need is a shift. I mean, all the bloggers out there, hats off to them, but sadly one celebrity or one talk show that points us in the wrong direction can undo decades of blogging work.
Absolutely. I mean, that's true. But I mean, I think, again, if you look, back to, as you were saying, way back when, our environment is completely different. Again, we've made it easier to eat these kind of unhealthy processed foods. They're everywhere. And we've also, like I said, I think we've factored one of the things we've also factored movement out of the day. So, and not that I don't like my dishwasher or my washing machine, but I mean, just, you think about simple little things like that, even, opening your garage door. Way back when you had to get out of your car, which would have added a little bit of activity to the day, opened that garage door. And now what do? You just press a button. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a shifting, or the environment has shifted throughout the decades. And I think that we need to pull back and say, how do we change this, or how do we not let it overtake us?
And it seems like there is a pattern there of both for the movement and for the nutrition arena. It's returning to a more natural state. The natural state of humans is to move around and to have to do things. Right. And the natural state of humans is to eat stuff that exists in nature. I mean, that's just that is natural and normal. And when we deviate from normal, our health deviates from normal. It becomes abnormal and we become sick. It's pretty.
Yep. That sounds right.
That about sums it up.
Yeah. You got it, Jonathan.
Well, Karen, on that note, I wanted to quickly talk about your new book, which is quite exciting. It's called Understanding Your Food Allergies and Intolerances, a guide to their management and treatment. If you could tell us a quick bit about this book, it's quite exciting, a partnership with the Harvard Medical School, and I'll let you just tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, Jonathan, we know that food allergies and food intolerances, they are two different things, are, rising slightly. Most people think that they're in greater numbers, but this is a book really that is a basic guide to helping people understand, first of all, what the difference is between a food allergy and a food intolerance. And then once they understand the differences, kind of figuring out where they need to go, what their next step is, what the protocol is for diagnosing one of these, and then what the treatment might be. Again, it's just kind of a basic book just to give readers the information that they have about these two conditions. So, yeah.
I love it. Well, again, it's that focus on quality over quantity, which truly, if we could just embed that in our minds in and of itself, I think would do so much. So, Karen, what's next for you? I mean, you're doing all kinds of stuff. You're actually a world record holder. I mean, you're like the Tim Ferriss. You're like the female Tim Ferriss.
Oh, Jonathan. Wow. All right. I don't know about that, but I'm continuing. I will be ever present in the magazine thing. So, my byline will continue to be out there. I've got a lot of things coming up with the magazines and things like that. As far as the world record, I'm going, the Nordic walking is where I hold it, and am looking at what my next goal is for Nordic walking. I certainly have other fitness goals in mind, but it's the Nordic walking where I'm going to be focusing on to see what I can do with that next, and just making sure that I stay as healthy as possible. So yeah.
Well, I love it. Well, certainly, I know you spend a lot of time in Portland, Oregon, so we're out here in the Pacific Northwest. So if you're ever in the Seattle area, I'd love to get together with you for a cup of green tea or coffee or whichever you prefer. So
actually, Jonathan, I've just switched. I love green tea, but I just started drinking coffee, so it's a new addition to my diet. So.
I love it. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me, and say hello to Seattle for me.
Will do. Well, thank you, Karen. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. And please feel free to check out Karen's work. There's certainly a lot of it. And chances are, if you read any mainstream fitness, health, or nutrition media, you've read it already. So check her out at KarenAsp.com. That's KarenAsp.com. And her brand new book, which is St. Martin's Press published it, is a collaboration with two Harvard physicians. It's called Understanding Your Food Allergies and Intolerances. It is available everywhere you buy books. So remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Talk with you soon.